The story begins by showing a brief recap of the flashback of the life of the oldest in the Manhwa clan. He was upside down waiting for his death this time, and he was named seo-cheon. We just call him Joseo in the future. A member who joined the Manhwa clan thanks to the trajectory of fate that passed through him. While still a beggar at the age of a boy throughout his life, he went through various obstacles until he arrived at the position as one of the elders in the clan. Short indeed when mentioned, but if you want to see further how many great wars have been through by Mr. Joe, also countless how many human lives must have floated on the edge of his sharp sword. The era of the Great War, as the people in the plains of China called the years of bloodshed that Mr. Joe went through during his lifetime and at the end of his life, because there was no other candidate who could be used as a leader in the Cave Mountain clan, forced in quotes the oldest in the clan to make Mr. Joe as their leader. Not because he was the greatest, but because the elders of his age had already died on the battlefield first. The empty title of the term could be said to have been obtained by Pak Jo in the end, because that was haunted by the heavy burden that Pak Jo had to spend the rest of his life by continuing to forge martial abilities, as well as increasing his cultivation class. The increase in the position of chairman has certainly given him unlimited access to all the martial arts books owned by the clan. But what is the age limit of a human being in the end becomes the main barrier that cannot be avoided by Mr. Joe. His age is getting older and wrinkles in every part of his body is getting smaller. The portion of meat bound by his muscles is also getting less and less in the age of Grogoti. What is the meaning of this? Old Bajo thought I could not find a lover all my life, which became an easy thing for others to do by just practice and practice. I want to be able to succeed in this Murim world, but because of the lack of ability that I have all the things I try to be the biggest regret that I feel now, said Mr. Joe in his heart at that time, while staring blankly at the ceiling of the room where his body was laid. One of the most chaotic era in the world of Murim has passed. There have been many stories and folklore spread in the community that describe the achievements of the survivors of the war. There have been many names of new heroes emerging, and even the names of famous criminals are now always the subject of heated discussion in the Murim community. But no one outside the Manhwa clan knew the name of this Joshin man. The old man's limp hands trying to reach space, and as the level of consciousness that increasingly blurred the stream of tears has now accompanied his last breath, I've wasted my life, once the last sentence that occurred in his head. Before the end of the dark, that he could only see Mr. Joe died, leaving a million regrets for his own life. Even so, the sky seemed to have different plans for this old man. A beam of light he could see again, and after he took the trouble to open his eyes again, there was already a figure of his teacher who had been calling Joseo's name. Yes, he had been taken back to his past, when he was only 8 years old, and the figure of the teacher who was next to him today was a master named Yu Jeon. At first, it was still difficult for him to believe this regression process, but after a few days of spending time in the Manhwa clan headquarters, he was able to accept it. This time, if he had been given a second chance by the heavens to mend any deep regrets he felt in his former lifetime, looked very happy. Of course, the expression shown by little Joseo. This time is the years before the Great War raged east. There will be many new opportunities he had, and by capitalizing on a pile of memories in an earlier life that is still firmly attached to his brain, Joseo is sure if he can succeed in this second lifetime. I've read a lot of martial arts books in the clan library. I also know by heart about some big events that will happen in the future. Let's do this, I'll do it. Well, Joseo muttered confidently at that time. And now that he had started his daily activities as a level 4 martial disciple in the Master Ho clan, it was only then that he realized that he had to repeat the grueling training that the disciples here had to undergo. how not every day the bodies of the little ones here have been spurred to run up the hills to get to the main training field. Josuo's nagging forced his body through this morning's running session, and not enough to reach the training field located in the Nathan Temple. The students here have to pass thousands of neighbors neatly arranged at an angle of 45 degrees. This final path is also known as the children's hell for the disciples. Upon arrival, there was no respite given to them. The seniors who were chasing there had ordered the students to form a line to practice their wooden sword-slashing moves, and thus, without feeling, a year had passed since Joshio had spent his tiring days at the clan headquarters. Now, one night, 9-year-old Joshio is sitting in his room making up his memories. He knows a lot about the events that will happen in the future, but that doesn't mean he knows every detail and departs from fear. There are important things that will be missed by him. Later, Joshio took the initiative to write all the summary of the bond he had in a small book for him to guide him in the future. It was a matter of what he had to do in this second life, and the first thing he felt important to do right now was to go to the huge manhwa tree that was growing around Mount Hua's headquarters, because based on his memories 66 years down the line, there would be a genius disciple in this clan who discovered a secret cultivation technique related to the existence of that tree. Hurry up the next morning, Joshio quickly came to the tree in question. Even though 1 year of morning running training was freer indeed, he was now, and the exercises that children his age had to do more were done on the training field every day. Long story short, sit now in the reclining position of the little boy. The exercise he will do this time is a basic breathing exercise that is actually known by all clan members, but there is a little change he made. Instead of randomly absorbing the energy of nature, by sitting under a manhwa tree, Joshio can connect directly with the hundreds of years old tree. Every particle of air that comes out of the tree Joshio breathes in his breath, and every breath he exhales will be sucked by the tree, and then processed in such a way to create an interconnected loop. There is a philosophy of natural balance contained in this technique. And that's why the basic breathing technique of Mount Hua, which is known for its very slow technique and limited king capacity, can change very drastically if collaborated with the technique being done by, say, Joshio. Now the speed and absorption capacity of Hugh into this boy's body has increased several times than it should. And this continues to be done by Joshio every day until, in the end, the nickname Maya, although now attached to this boy mockery of the nickname, and it became the main ingredient of Joshio's friends want to bully this child in hordes. You only have that tree as your friend. It's no wonder you never joined the other children here, one of the oldest children of the group to Joshio, while showing the typical annoying face of delinquent boys. Indeed, little children like you are the word demons that roam the earth. Usually I will only expel you, but if left alone, you will still bother me again in the future. So before things like this will become a good habit, I just end it today, little Joshio said at that time. And it was moving quickly towards his friends earlier, and obviously it was debauchery. He was in front of their kicking smackdown, and so on, typical, like a child's fight moment in general, until in the end the bully kids ran away, leaving Joshio just like that. And the time passed after that evening. Joshio was still sitting cross-legged under the manhwa tree. So far the portion he had collected in his fund was equivalent to a portion of 6 months, and this amount he had only collected within 1 month thanks to using the secret technique. Earlier, the target given by your own party in the next year is to collect a year's portion of Hugh into the attention of his students. And Manhwa's basic boxing technique must be mastered by the students within 1 year, and half of the target has been achieved by Joshio in the past month. I think only repetition practice is all I can do now. My body is still not developed, and I can only wait for this moment. The child's gut in his heart, and began to move from the position of asking to return to his private room. And not yet had the Joshio down the stairs in front of him. The leader of the stubborn this morning had come to him again. He brought along his teacher anyway, to come see Joseo this time as for the purpose, let alone in addition to demanding revenge on Joseo for the actions he had done this morning, and could have guessed what would happen if the figure of an adult man intervened in a child's fight. Do not want to be heard by the old man all the explanations that Joseo convey, despite the reasons that are strong enough in the end. One hard slap still landed on Joseo's cheek petals again. The sound of the slap was heard, and the arrogant chief was even more excited when he saw the condition of his enemy, and not only once the man intended to make calculations to Joseo, but fortunately the old man's hand movements could be held back by Joseo's teacher, who had just arrived at the location. And in short, the debate broke out again between two adults who each believed the information presented by their respective students who had installed horses, and the old man, when each argument was successfully broken by Mr. Yujok. But when his teacher Joseo released his fighter's energy this time, only then did the old man understand that if he pulled his sword out of the sleeve, it also meant that he would return home seriously injured, because after all his teacher Joseo was known as one of the talented knights owned by the Manhwa clan, and Joe felt he had no other choice. Apologized to the old man and hurried to leave the location without carrying any more grudges, still owned by his students. After the incident, the body of Mr. Yusuf so weak, instantly his knees tremor and dry cough he often issued, because it has issued a large amount of fighter energy to scare the old man. This is also one of the big homework for Joseo in his second life. The teacher who has the title of the position Blade actually has extraordinary talent among his generation friends, despite the physical condition that he has is very weak because of a mysterious illness that he has suffered since childhood. The clan has tried various ways to heal the pain suffered by Mr. Yusuf, but all the efforts they tried in the end did not show any significant results at all. In the process of healing the strong candidate who is predicted to deserve to be one of the members of this hwasan manhua's division, and here is still attached in Joseo's memory about the moments of the death of this highly respected teacher, as told at the beginning, will meet his death in the next few years. And departing from this, the next day Joseo replanned what actions could be taken to cure his teacher. There were two things he had to do in the near future. First, finding a medicine that could change the fate of his teacher, who in his own calculations still had 5 years left for his teacher before he breathed his last. And the second is to be the first person to find a tomb containing a treasure relic of the figure of the legendary thief who holds the title of Tre Spiritual Minds. The figure is a martial artist who is active in opposing the time 300 years ago, is very famous for his stealing ability in all circles of the Muslim community, and the story is still continued to this day for 100 years. During his lifetime, the legendary thief had stolen various Kita martial secrets from various great clans and disciples, not only books and heirlooms, the countless collection of treasures predicted to have been stored by it in his final resting place. The empire itself claimed that their side had captured the thief and imprisoned him to death. When the figure was never seen active again, but how could such a ridiculous claim be believed by the knights? And departing from that massive exploration has been carried out by various large clans for hundreds of years to find the tomb containing the treasure of the legendary thief. Well, here fortunately for Joseo, he already knew if the tomb would be found within the next 6 years. Although it didn't lead to war, there were many heirlooms and ancient books that it would be a pity if he didn't get them first from others. One problem that still blocked him this time was that he couldn't leave this clan until he entered adulthood. Later, the strict regulations that apply in Mount Hua only allow students who have been declared adults to wander, leaving the advertisement, "What can I do?" Gumanja see opening after that, and imperceptibly time passed after 2 months. Since the incident earlier, the level that Joseo had collected in the details was comparable to the progress for 2 years. In the middle of the snow that morning, Josuo was walking to meet the teacher in his private small house, but he had not yet had time to open the door of the room. The coughing sound of the teacher he could hear from behind began to make this child dizzy again about what options he had to be able to cure the mysterious illness suffered by his teacher. Already, so far all the efforts made have been countless. How often he is looking for a doctor who can cure the teacher, while to call the legendary doctor the fee is too big, and if the leader of the Murim Alliance is not accepted by the legendary figure, what can this little boy do to bring him to this place? Spinning fast work of his brain made that morning, and at this moment, an idea is now obtained by accident. If I cannot get medicine for my teacher, what about herbal plants, muttered at that time, while thinking again of the various herbal plants that can be chosen to be given to his teacher. And if he is not mistaken, remember, there is still one secret information that he has not written down into his notebook some time ago, is about the discovery of medicinal fruit that will happen in the future 20 years into the future. Told by some adventurers who Joshua met first, if the fruit can increase the vitality of a human, location of its discovery is in the north adjacent to the river, not far from the headquarters of Manhwa. I was too blinded by my own notes, it was good that I was more open-minded, starting from now. Human Josuo at that time and time again, passed after 1 week since the incident. Josuo, who delivered drinks to his teacher's room, got information that the teacher would leave this room for a period of 1 week to follow the regular meeting of the elders of Manhwa. And this opportunity is used Josu for a moment to leave the headquarters in search of medicinal fruit, whose discovery location is not far from the headquarters of his clan, as for being able to get out without being detected by the guards. Josuo took advantage of a mouse hole whose existence was only known by a few people in this clan, and so without wasting much time he ran with all his energy to the riverbank in the northern part to harvest the fruit in question. Upon arrival, still with a heavy breath, Josuo, stripped of all the clothes he was wearing, burying the clothes earlier to the bottom of the trees around the river, made some short warm-up movements, and immediately threw himself into the half-frozen river, which was apparently a mud in the bottom of the cold, which was certainly not to save the life of his teacher, which sane boy would dive into the river in a snowy season like this. Until after quite a long time down the river, but was now entered by Josuo a small hidden cave that connects earlier to a narrow underground plains and winding cave connection also had shivering cold. Of course he was lucky, for the nights in this era of ki that they store in Ganshin can be flowed throughout the body to maintain the warmth of each of their organs, and a short story, after a short rest, began to be traced by Josuo's small and slippery cave, just by relying on his sense of touch to the wall to guide his footsteps, until finally Josuo now arrived at the core of the cave, whose flat surface is wider than the small caves that have been traced since. There is a super large tree that grows in the middle of the underground cave, that its roots infiltrate behind the rocks, sharp and shady leaves, and emit bright light. In the middle of the dark conditions of the cave, in one of the large roots, there appears a bluish fruit that grows, and how surprised Josuo, when observing further the big tree, there is a large black snake that tied his body around the trunk. There is no doubt that he said it was a mythical animal that could cultivate like humans, so that it could make them mutate into even larger sizes than animals. Like him, doubt he certainly never thought Joshio would meet such a creature in this place, but armed with the determination to be able to save lives, Siguru, forced now by Josuo footsteps to steal the fruit, was guarding the snake. And the jackpot now that he got was not only one, there were 2 bluish fruits growing at the roots of the tree. He obviously immediately picked them up after finishing harvesting the 2 bluish fruits. Joshio left the big trunk again, and here he could hear a hissing sound whispering from behind him. The figure of a black snake that was the guardian of this tree had already woken up, and now had straightened the front of his body facing Joseo. Silence made the situation even more tense, that the boy felt helpless. He was in front of the snake. There was nothing Joseo could do to save himself. But he could not guess, just looked at the big snake, and then returned to his hibernation sleep position. What makes Joseo able to return home with his life intact in his little adventure today is that he only urinated a little. The refusal of the teacher was seen at the beginning, but after being explained at length how he could get the fruit, he mostly added with quotation marks. The teacher accidentally accepted the fruit immediately after he consumed it and asked Yoshio to wait outside to become his Dharma protector. He felt stronger than all the drugs he had consumed so far and poured out his sweat while trying to absorb the energy slowly, and that day at least half a day the teacher spent in a cross-legged position until finally he came out of the room to tell Joseo what had happened to his body after consuming the medicinal fruit. The teacher explained here that if it turns out that the disease he has suffered so far is related to his Q life, the specific type of that every human being has since they are born cannot be replenished, which also means that if someone runs out of the number of legs of his life or has problems in managing the Q, that person will die instantly or at least become chronically ill as experienced by his teacher. The teacher's guess here is that the part of his body that became the vessel of Q life has been damaged since he was small and can be felt by the teacher after fully absorbing the medicinal energy owned by the fruit that Joseo gave earlier. The crack in the vessel of life has healed as it should, which also means Joseo succeeded in his first mission in a row of achievements that he wanted to achieve in his second life this time. Happy, of course, the teacher and the student chatted their mouths, both gave thanks and thanked each other, and the remaining fruit was given by the teacher to the Joseo this time. I really understand the condition of my own body. One fruit is more than enough to heal me, so you eat the rest of this fruit. It will be very useful to polish your teeth, said the teacher at that time, after successfully curing the disease suffered by his teacher during this time. Joseo began to make plans again to choose what he would do next, sitting relaxed while consuming the medicinal fruit that his teacher had given him. There were already some references that were thought of in his head now. It was true that he could directly learn all the derivative techniques of the manhua breathing art, but if he acted haphazardly here, it would arouse suspicion from the elders, which also results in the increasingly limited space he has, because that's after considering many factors and thinking about the preparations he must make to face the era of the Great War later. Joseo decided to train Mist Violet Divine Art technique, a bundle of martial techniques that can only be learned by the head of the Manhua clan. But if looking at his past life, the fifth oldest under the clan chief had also been taught this technique because of the war situation that directly threatened the existence of such a high-level technique. There was no other choice for this young man's mind if he wanted to survive in the future, which he already knew would be filled with major conflicts throughout Murim. As long as they don't know I learned it, I don't think there will be any problems, even though in the end I won't be able to continue covering it up in the war era. Only my cultivation will be higher than now, and there will be many reasons I can make them, murmur Joseo at that time. And without feeling a whole month, he has been practicing breathing in the forest to absorb all the chi energy contained in the medicinal fruit he ate 1 month ago. The total chi energy lodged in his teeth has reached the level of 30 years, even though the chi energy contained in the medicinal fruit is much more than the amount of the boy's body that he has now can only hold such a large dose. It is wasted in terms of the remnants of energy contained in the fruit because of the limitations of his physical condition. And whether this has a good effect, it is not so apparently explained by his teacher. When Joseo came to ask to be checked, the balance in his body could be destroyed if he did not immediately train his physical, because that's been decided by the teacher if in the next few months Joseo must do intense physical exercise to strengthen the body of the boy he had. His brutal way was started in the morning. Joseo was required to run without stopping, while using all his energy until it was completely empty. Approaching the middle of the afternoon, this boy is required to climb a steep rocky hill, only by relying on his physical strength, and obviously, like hell, physical exercise. It also feels very high, the rocky hill. The gap in the handle that he can use as a pedestal, everything is sharp, not to mention the strong wind that continues to hit his little body at such a height. Falling means death, and the only option he has is to endure the pain all over his body, because he is only allowed to rest every day when he has managed to reach the top of the steep hills. And without feeling it has been several months Joseo has been doing exercises like this. As for the changes that can be seen directly on this boy's body, is that he has become taller than before. His muscle bowls have also begun to form, and thanks to continuously draining his kai, every day Joseo has reached a great level in the manhua breathing art technique. Until finally now the time has come, felt by the teacher, to teach sword techniques to his students. That plum blossom sword art is so the name of the technique that Joseo will learn, a technique that he has actually mastered outside his head, but he still has to follow his class, because there will be a second mission that must be done related to this teacher as well. From the observation that he did some time back, this teacher has not reached a high enough level in the sword technique earlier, because that's the moments of this exercise Joseo used to give indirect direction to his teacher in order to get enlightenment. The way is quite easy. He just needs to show how the sword dance movement that he feels. A long chat about the basic materials of the technique continues to be opened by Joseo. Insert corrections, and the most important points are also inserted by Joseo in every speech. And long story short, after some time they did repetitions of exercises like that, came the day when the teacher felt there was a new enlightenment that he got in mastering the technique that he was supposed to teach Joseo. Immediately sitting in meditation, he recast all the enlightenment he got. And so once again the future of his teacher and manhua had been changed by Joseo, and time passed after a few days since the incident, the picture of Mr. Yusuk's healing of his teacher Joseo, and the improvement of his mastery of plum swordsmanship had reached the ears of the Sattva clan, and therefore a special opportunity was now given to Mr. Yusuk to carry out a mission, which was also a test for him to enter the Plum Blossom Sword Knight Division. I'll be travelling for quite a while, don't be lazy, you practice. I've also enrolled you in the exam to enter the Lotus unit, so it's good that you get ready from now on. The light of his teacher at that time to Joseo, and passed away leaving his students, began this confusion after listening to his teacher earlier. Had not the Lotus unit was a mini version of the PB Sword Knight Division, which also means the ties of clan rules will be even stronger given to the students who are in it, not in line with his big plan later, Joseo thought. In the next 5 years, the tomb of the legendary thief will be found if he is selected in the unit that can mess up all his plans. But after he thought about it again, he could also use this test as a moment to attract the attention of the elders, because after all he had to be able to leave this clan at the age of 13. Because it took him 2 years to recruit outsiders and explore the tomb to drain all its contents well. Starting from this calculation, Joseo decided that it was impossible for him to leave the clan at the age of 13 in the normal way. I had to be the most prominent student in this clan, and entering the Lotus unit was one of the keys out of the clan that I could get easily. Yoshio insisted at that time, and unexpectedly he arrived on the exam day, which was intended to be crowded around the battle area, filled with 4th generation boys who were just watching, waiting for their turn to compete, and not a few who came just to observe closely the most beautiful student of the 4th generation, owned by this clan. He was Naxol, so that we would more familiarly call him by the name of Soul in the future. a female sword knight who managed to get the title of Phoenix from Mount Hua in Joseo's previous life, just like Mr. Yuzok died young. Also this soul in his past Joseo, and from childhood, could not be underestimated the ability of this soul sword. It was seen in the fight conducted in this test. Several male students who faced him had been made to fall by the soul. And if you see the last standing rules that apply in this test, you can be sure that you will pass him into the Lotus unit later, until after several matches led by Seo. Joseo asked permission to be able to compete stepping upright. The boy carried his sharp sword into the middle of the arena, and after the referee had allowed the two to start the fight, directly installing the horses of each of the two boys. "Please, brother, I allow you to give the first attack," said the soul at that time, and immediately greeted Joseo without hesitation. And how surprised soul at that time, the beat of Joseo's feet had exploded his body quickly in front of Joseo, ran behind his sharp sword, and swung hard at the soul, who had put up a defense, and clearly echoed the sound of the contest of the two swords. Not only did Joseo repeatedly slash his sword, forcing Soul's body to retreat when it could not withstand the tremendous pressure of each slash, but unfortunately for the little girl, she had not yet had time to improve the posture of her horses. Joseo had come back to her again, swinging his sharp sword vigorously, and now clanging the two swords. Until in the end, Soul was thrown back and forth with tremors all over her body in pain, and the girl, who realized that it was impossible for her to win against Joseo, had now dropped her own sword. Soul stated that she had given up to continue the fight. The absolute victory was obtained by Joseo this time, but instead of the shouts of praise he got, the curses from all the students had actually flooded his ears. How could it not be that the students of the Mount Hua clan like them could admit the movement blindly that Joseo was performing as a martial art? There was no sword dance, shown just a random swing supported by his physical strength. It was a bit strange indeed. The people hear this matter was also a hot debate at the elders' table when they wanted to decide what they should do about Joseo's victory this morning. Most could not accept the boy's victory, but the most senior figure at the meeting, Pak Wiji, the master of the Plum Blossom Sword, actually had another view of Joseo's action. Let's just accept his victory anyway. And in his own way, the boy can defeat all his challengers. And to close the debate between UI as the leader of the PB Sword Knights, announced that Joseo and Soul will be included in the Lotus unit. Then he turned to the others, and the time passed quickly. 1 year later, being in the same unit makes Soul and Joseo become closer every day, and this has invited jealousy from other male students, has become a common sight for Joseo when, without wind or rain, there will be seniors who come to him who emphasize, if they do not like, to see the closeness of the two boys. And long story short, there came a day that Josie had been waiting for one of the elders who was checking his Q flow when he explained to Joseo if he would be given a mission out of the clan. As for the mission this time, Joseo would be accompanied by 2 juniors and 1 senior. There was Jang Hong, Jang Soon, and Senior Gupang. Relax, you don't need to be tense. The mission we did this time was not too dangerous. Why open Senior Gubong to his juniors that morning, while leading their steps, leaving the Mount Hua headquarters? And from the chat that was rolling at that time, Joseo got the information that the purpose of their trip this time was the Gizu region, a region located in the south, which also had to pass through the Chongqing region first to be able to get there. Although he could not leave his group just like that in the middle of the road, there would be a chance, he thought, in the middle of the journey later, and so began their journey. Now forests and mountains they passed on foot, and before being able to land his feet in the Gizu region, this group had to pass the long river route by riding small boats that became public transportation in this region. This fun trip was initially felt by the 2 Joseo juniors to get out of the headquarters, and travel out of the area with the group thought the two juniors here like a short vacation given to them by the clan, until in the middle of their journey across the river saw this, from a distance, another passenger boat that is now approaching the boat Joseo group ride. Hwasan is clearly written on the sail of the boat, which also means that if the boat is owned by a group of river bandits who control the territorial waters here. After getting off the front-line tight boat, a Kodet old man who greeted Senior Bupong, "Sorry to interrupt your journey, my lord," is a representative of the faction of 18 pirates who protect this area. Actually, we work here for free, but lately we've been having trouble getting funding, if you'd like. Can we ask for a donation here? The light of the man as friendly as possible to Senior Bupong lost glanced at the base of the clothes worn by the senior, and so without much ado handed over by Kek. Bupong, a piece of silver to the old man, greeted with thanks as he passed away, just left this group, and obviously already exploding expression of inadmissibility shouted by Jang Soon and Jang Hong Tak Ebis. Think they why knights from Mount Hua want to be taxed by a group of bandits who came to them earlier, but explained by Senior Bupong here. It wasn't that he was afraid to confront the man, but that there were civilians at stake here they could have fought, and even deployed knights from headquarters to increase the scale of the battle, but after what happened to the civilians who get the sustenance along this river, the source of their income will disappear, and it is not impossible that their lives will be targeted by the bandits further if you think the group from Mount Hua will be blacklisted if you want to cross this river in the future by using the services of boat paddlers in this region, and if it is to be developed again, if there is a big battle going on between the Mountain Hua clan, which is also a member of the Orthodox Murim Alliance against the group of 18 water bandits, then the balance in Murim will be broken inevitably. Here the uniqueness of the world is that so far there are 4 factions that have been established for a long time. First, there is the Murim Alliance faction filled by Orthodox clans. Second, there is the Devil faction filled by non-Orthodox clans. Third, there is the Daimonic faction. And fourth, there is the Bloody Teachings faction. The 4 factions are equally strong so far, and if there is only one faction that shows a reduction in their troops, the other faction will respond by responding to the attack in order to expand their territory. It's a bit complicated, but I feel it's important to explain this in advance before we enter the war eras later, and in short, until Joseo's entourage is now in the Gizo area. A slimy man who claims to be a traveling merchant immediately swiftly approached them to offer delivery services when he saw the plum flower symbol sewn at the base of the sleeve that Bupong Sr. was wearing. It has become common for people here, if there are guests dressed as knights who come to their region, then most likely the purpose of those people is the Murim Alliance branch office in the middle of the city, which is similar to the tourist area for knights in the Gizu region, and in short, Joseo's party has arrived at the Alliance branch office to meet with representatives who will explain further about the mission they must carry out. Here too, there are representatives of the Zuj family who in the future will pair up with representatives of Mount Hua. This time the mission is unmitigated. Even the younger brother of the head of their family, Sizujesa, and his 3 nephews have arrived at this place first. Before the arrival of Mount Hua's entourage, Joseo felt that this was a crossing of fate that he never imagined would happen sooner. How not all members of the Zuj family were known as reliable strategists owned by the Alliance. The first son of their leader, named Zuj Sang, will be known by the nickname Heaven Army in times of war, the class of war strategy skills. He has played an important role in the victory of the Alliance in those times of war. His second son, named Zujejrun, is no less great than his brother. The difference is that he is better known for a variety of cunning tactics, entrapping enemies, and deceptive magic abilities that make his second name predicted as the reincarnation of the familiar Zujelian figure with that name. While his third son, named Samke, will be known later the ability to craft war machines and the science of tracking traps owned by this child will play a major role in the advancement of combat technology owned by the Murim Alliance and the Empire later. Unfortunately, in his old age, Samke was often treated inappropriately by his family. He continued to get angry because of the clumsy attitude he always showed to others. Samke also showed no interest in studying the science of battle tactics, which also meant that he had run out of knowledge that became the hallmark of the Zhuge family. The three juniors from Mount Hua are welcome to spend their time relaxing with the three children of the Zhuge family, while Senior Gupeng and Mr. Shugihak will have an important meeting with several heads at the Alliance branch office, and obviously instead of approaching Zhuge Sang or Tsukijun, Joseo prefers to approach Zhuge Sunk, because after all it would be his biggest investment if he could get close to the machinery expert's son. "Hey, why do you approach me? Better you stay away, because there will be no point you make friends with a loser like me," Samke said to Joseo at that time, who had begun to feel uncomfortable over the approach made by his new prospective friend. It can be quite understandable by Joseo Samke's speech in the current era of science that is not too useful. But at the time of the discovery of the tomb of the legendary thief, later this child's ability will only be recognized for the first time by the world. Based on the memories he has, Samke will be the only person in the Murim world who can conquer the various trap mechanisms scattered in the tomb. Because of his ability, the Zhuge family will be the only party who manages to get the most treasures in exploring the tomb later. Ye only they make as a means of production of machinery in the war era Erek later. There is no other choice is Suzuki Mulan, because only he is the one who studied the science of machinery, which is also very much needed in the war. The young days of this child he spent in his personal workshop, became a slave in his own family, which ultimately led to severe stress, and Samke decided to commit suicide because of all the pressure exerted by his family. Son of a bitch can be called the oldest in the Sugi family. That's why if his own family cannot accept it, gladly Joseo offered to be his foster brother. With your brother this, you will meet a new world. To hell with all the challenges given your family, I will support all the actions you do. And not only that, I will prepare all the needs you need to run your hobby later. Firmly Joseo at that time loudly, that could be trusted by the Samke. He even expelled Joseo from his room at that time. And whether this Joseo could recruit the Samke into his team. Although always ignored by Samke, their rest days in Gizu were spent approaching the little boy. During the 2-day trip, this group to the Wengan area, Joshio also always opened a conversation with him on various topics, starting from hobbies to general knowledge topics, and the past history of the Mudram community he always talked about, and gradually began to open this Samke to serve the chat of his new friend. Until finally they arrived at the temporary camp of the Mudram Alliance, which at this time was in a condition of small-scale warfare against a group from the River of the Evil Union. This was also the main purpose of the arrival of representatives of Mount Hua, and the Zhuge family reported by representatives of the troops who welcomed their arrival if the number of troops from the Ro River of the Evil group was 600 people. While the troops from the Murim Alliance only numbered 400, were without the support of the Supreme Master at all, and only for a moment, Mr. Sujison analysed every report received that one of the other troop products had come into the tent again. He reported that Ro's troops had attacked the surrounding village area filled with civilians. So obviously, the two parties moved quickly to the location of the battle. Senior Gupeng immediately went down to the battlefield, while the three juniors were only allowed to pay attention from afar. Immediately changed the course of the fight when the export from Mount Hua was present. Once the swing of the sword he made was able to reduce one enemy from the other side, and therefore the more excited the troops who followed him shouted loudly. They swung their weapons while advancing further into the middle of the battlefield. while Mr. Subazon, who observed from the top of the cliff, had been made excited, also found their side had the upper hand in this battle, but his old nephew Shizuja-sang actually thought otherwise, seeing the way this fight their number was too few. At least there were about 150 troops who did not go down in this fight unmistakably. He thought this was a trap that the enemy had made to divert the alliance. He had conveyed his analysis to his uncle, but what power was still considered Suzuki-sang's little son by his uncle? And how surprised the uncle was that the watchman, who was in the tower not far from them, shouted that there was already a group of troops from the other row party who had approached the village from the other direction. He wanted to rob the property of the bandits' residence while looking for young female prisoners to be slaves to satisfy their worldly desires. Luckily here Joseo had moved earlier to listen to Shizuja-sang's words, assisted by several alliance troops who were still guarding the village boundary fortress. The young man had led the limited troops. He had to face the bandits, who were still taking turns, passing through the small gaps they made by punching holes in the wooden fortress. Immediately, without much waiting for the first enemy, for Joseo had shot quickly at him, swinging a large machete that he brought to the 12-year-old boy without the slightest hesitation. I could only see the shoulders of the heroes in the war in the previous life, but this time it was my shoulders that the people in this disciple would see during the battle. Joseo muttered slowly at that time, while serving the cleaver slashing from his enemy, and the crotch broke up so that the two bodies of the bandit had his sword. It is very good that the actions taken by Joseo here can not only subvert his enemy, the various orders he shouted to the troops also proved successful in suppressing the enemy, until now more and more corpses of bandits who have starved lifeless there, until the bandit leader, who felt cornered here, finally issued his last move to raise the morality of the troops, who have now been shaken by the 12-year-old boy. For anyone who can cut off the child's neck and bring it to me, I will report it to our superiors at headquarters, and a wad of gold will be given to you as a reward. He shouted loudly at that time, and it turned out to be incredible, the effect. So the bandits and madness was made. Ignore them with the Croco army. Suddenly he thought that no matter how painful he was, his cultivation level was still not high enough to face such a group of crazy adults. And in the midst of Joseo's helplessness, there was the sound of a small child's footsteps dragging a large bamboo stick not far from Joseo's position. "Hey motherfucker, you see the gift I've brought, this bait," the little boy loudly at that time, and a big explosion was heard afterwards, coming from a strange weapon carried by Sumki. Dozens of arrows pointing at the enemy afterwards. So dumb they watched the performance of a strange weapon that they only saw used on the battlefield this time. And obviously more and more victims of life who fell lost their skulls could be broken by a bow that had been fired earlier. Yes, it was a weapon made by Seisunki. Since it was not visible, it was busy looking for this young boy's bamboo messiu powder that he always carried. He used it as an explosive bow arrow that he got from the Psycho Alliance troops. He sounded satisfied to see the success of the weapon he made in a hurry like that, and Joseo could imagine here, if in a moment like this, it was as scary as a weapon that could be overturned for what the story would be if he made it with better raw materials. The bandits were still reluctant to give up this old man's entourage attack after attack towards Joseo, who they felt was the most troublesome figure in this fight. They kept trying, but the Joseo had regained his momentum, obviously never back down, to face his challengers. One by one they had made a hole in his stomach by the boy's sharp sword. It is difficult to follow the eyes of ordinary people fast movements that actually show only fleeting glimpses that are seen, accompanied by the fall of the enemy's body afterwards, which is already covered with blood. The bandits who have more guts advance to the very front to face the boy one by one, even though none of their attack attempts can injure the body of Joseo. Until after dozens of challengers had now been defeated by Joseo jumped high. The young man felt advanced, sinking his body into the ranks of the bandit army, while loudly shouting if he was seo-cheon from Mount Hua, who was clearly overflowing again. The spirit of the Alliance troops saw the greatness of their leader's figure shaking the battleground filled with Joseo's name, was no longer afraid. They were now, as long as there was a sword knight as strong as the child leading them. The hope of winning this battle could already be seen in front of their eyes. While on the part of the bandits, increasingly shrunken again mentally, their leader saw the course of the fight one by one. His men fell, not only bothered by Joseo's rain of bows from a strange weapon used by seo-cheon slowly, but surely could beat back the ranks of his troops towards the outside of the fortress at that time. Until the leader of the bandits has not been able to decide anything, the figure of the Black Horse, who became the main star this time, has managed to penetrate the line of defense of his men. Joseo has now faced directly with the leader of the bandits. Strangely here, instead of rushing to protect their leader, dozens of bandits who are still left, even more panicked in moments like that, they have dropped various sharp weapons they carry, galloping past the leader trying to escape from this battle that they think will be impossible for them to win. And not to be outdone by his men, have turned the body anyway. Vulcanic old man ran faster than all his subordinates regardless of his pride as a leader. But unfortunately for the old man, with a quick step expelled, have been pulled often behind the clothes he wore. "You will remain here, old man. Your information will be needed by our side." Firmly it to the old man, who has now wet the bottom of his pants. And long story short, after all has been settled by his side, Joseo here, Just King, the senior Gupong and other groups of troops were very panicked. They initially saw the situation at that location. Village fortifications have been damaged. Dozens of lives from both sides have also been lying unkempt throughout the streets of the village. Only then can the senior Gubong be calm here. If he sees Joseo coming out of the army camp without showing any of the injuries he received well, he began to doubt Mr. Shujizan. Here lost hearing the testimony of the representative of the guard troops. Angry, even he lost the representative of the troops explained that the main cause of the victory they got was the presence of Joseo, who led them all. "Nonsense, you, this is he. It's just a 12-year-old boy. Give me a reasonable explanation. That is indeed the case, sir. Please you ask all the troops here. We received direct orders from the boy during the fight. Because he is, our lives can be saved. Because he also, villagers still live here, can continue their lives calmly in the future." Firmly representative of the troops, who were also interrupted by the urgent testimony of his other friends. "Already, you just write the report. I will forward it later to the Alliance," said Pak Shuchison at that time. And their entourage returned to Gizo, because the main mission they had to run was completed with the absolute victory they got in the battle this afternoon. That night a small dinner party was organized by the Alliance. All the sumptuous dishes they prepared and warm conversations about the achievements of each individual were the main ingredients that people here discussed at that time. Unfortunately here, the achievements owned by seo-cheon. No one knew about it at the dinner meeting with a heavy heart. He also preferred to isolate himself from. It would be a shame to think that the Alliance was aware of the use of unregistered weapons in a war that had some written rules agreed upon by both sides. "You don't need to be discouraged, Sumki. Just think now is not the time for you to shine. But no, if not for being helped by the weapons you used in the war earlier, I could have died being attacked by the bandits. Be patient under my guidance. As your adoptive brother, I make sure the whole world will know the horror of the genius you have." Firmly to the Sumki at that time, when he met him after a dinner party. And so the conversation flowed between the two here. It was agreed by them, if it was true that this Joseo could help the Sumki achieve his dreams so far, let alone become an adopted brother to be his subordinate, Sumki was willing, as long as he could be a knight who could stand on a par with the children in his generation. Closed Joseo that night, and we turned the next 2 days still at the Alliance branch office. Hundreds of people from the area around Gizu now seemed to fill the yard outside the office, queuing for the opportunity to express their gratitude to the heroes of the battle a few days ago. It has become a tradition indeed in mainland China. If there is a faction that wins the war, there will be many representatives of trade houses or community associations that will show the bridge of their noses in front of the war heroes. The purpose is not only to form connections and introduce themselves to future goals related to the sustainability of their business in the region. Yes, like licking the boss is about well-boring moments, like this also turned out to have been waiting for Joseo from the beginning, still includes a tomb exploration mission, which is his big plan. He needs a fellow trader who he can trust, and from his memories in the past, there was a king of traders who lived in this Gizu area. Li Weichao was so named. The man was a prominent merchant. He controlled the trade routes in most of the plains of China, but of all the merchants who met them all this day, there was no one who introduced their name as Li Weichao earlier. Where the person went, it was impossible that he did not appear at moments like this. Yuman upset Joseo at that time, who was immediately distracted by the arrival of a thin man they had met when they had just set foot on the Guizhou. "Hello gentlemen, we meet again," said the thin mustachioed man to Senior Gupeng, who did not seem to care too much about his presence. Is not without reason. It has been a day of serving the pleasantries of the traders. We're very hungry anyway. His teeth dry, because forced to smile all day and already dizzy anyway. His head stood up from morning till night, and the guards who saw that Gupeng was about to leave the location immediately pulled back the trader to drag them out of the Alliance branch office complex. "Hey, what are you doing? Let go, don't you know I am the chairman of the Golden Merchant Organization? Even though I am dressed funny like this, our trading house is officially registered under the Alliance Party," the man shouted haphazardly when he was forcibly pulled by the guards. And at this moment, Joseo, who was listening to the man's words, just stopped his steps. Yes, even though the man's physical appearance was very different from what he saw, there was no doubt that the name of the trading house headed by the man was what Joseo had been looking for from the morning. And that way, when the two guards who dragged the man had returned to their respective posts, Joseo hurriedly approached the head earlier. "Hello, Mr. Chief, introduce my name is seo-cheon. Our Lord Joe, forgive the impudence I have shown earlier. Is there anything I can help you, sir? What is this related to the order from your senior?" No, I have a little business with you. Let's move from this place first, mister. Somewhat sensitive, this business. Because, replied Joseo at that time, and invite the chief trader to leave this place quickly. Well, here we can start to see the supernatural powers possessed by the head of this trader, who knows what the sky has given him. A snub nose owned by the head of the trader can smell the smell of money very well, if there are people who want to invite him to cooperate. And long story short, now arrived both in a tavern here. Without further ado, the Joseo immediately told the chief if he wanted to invest some money to the trading house led by Li Weichao instead of being an ordinary trader, you should start a business as a merchant of war from now on. Money will not be a problem, because in the near future I plan to drain the hidden tomb that contains so many treasures, said Joseo at that time, and flowed a serious chat between the two until midnight opened all by Joseo. To the chief a big plan that he will do, and the brain of understanding that they agreed tonight is Joseo to enlarge the scale of the trading house that he had. Joseo ordered Li Weichao to immediately recruit a reliable mercenary as a permanent bodyguard in the trading house, which he planned to form into a clan in the future. After taking care of all matters in the Guizhou region, it was time for the representatives of the Hua Mountain and the Zhuge family to leave the region. Riding a horse loaned by the Alliance branch office, moved quickly this group towards the port of the Yangtze River, where there was already a small group of Murim Alliance troops awaiting their arrival. While elsewhere at the headquarters of the River of the Evil Bandit group, the head of the group's spy division reported to their leader that he had received information about the movements of the Mountain Hua representatives and the Zhuge family who were about to leave the Gizo territory. "What should we do, sir? Those two men have played the biggest role in the defeat of our group in the Battle of Wangan territory," asked the spy division chief to his leader, who was already showing a furious expression when he heard it. "You gather the best knights we choose, also one of the strongest, to send that head of all the bastards to my front," replied the leader firmly, and immediately responded swiftly by his men by forwarding the information to each of their branch offices scattered throughout the banks of the river Yangs. Back to his group Joseo, they have arrived at the dock this time, a medium-sized passenger ship that has been filled by several Alliance knights is also ready to lift its anchor when it sees the arrival of the two groups. A bad feeling has been obtained by the senior Gyupang, here to quiet this pier, he thought. Nor are there many activities of boatmen and fishermen that they would usually easily find when arriving at this pier. "Maybe you are just too tired, sir. Let's just rest directly on the ship. The sooner we start the journey, the faster we will arrive at our respective bases," invited Mr. Zujizun to his senior Joseo. When he saw the look of concern still on his face, and with that departed from the pier, now the ship they were riding initially, there was no disturbance. They found the senior Gyupang, who looked worried thinly from earlier, had also been able to relax his vigilance a little, can breathe a little sigh of relief, because so far there are no suspicious signs from the movement of water ripples, and from the direction of the steep hills that are the wall dividing this river with the mainland. But because he accidentally observed a large school of fish passing next to the ship he was travelling in, he immediately jerked as the young man's body pulled out his sword from the sleeve while giving ready instructions to the Murim Alliance troops who were also on the ship, and obviously responded quickly by the 8 guardsmen by forming a formation. 8 guardsmen by forming a protective formation, where in the centre of the formation was filled by the 4 representatives of the Zhuge family, and also the 3 students from the Lotus unit of Manhwa. Shortly began to be heard thunderous laughter from several men from the direction of the top of the hill, whose appearance was all safely identical to the Maori troops that the senior Gyubang had faced before on the battlefield a few days ago. Yes, not only from up there, bubbles of air had also sprung up from the bottom of the river, accompanied by the rising waves of the water surface. Right in front of the ship Joseo's group was travelling on now appeared again dozens of bandits who had landed their feet perfectly on the deck of Joseo's cruise ship. Acting as the leader of the bandits, this time was a shaggy old man who had previously also been met by Joseo's entourage. Yukdero was the name that the old man had. Apparently he was based on Mr. Shujizun's knowledge. He was also included in the 100 Knights of Murim at the level of Great Master, who had the nickname Living Water Spearman, while the matter of the purpose of the arrival of this group prevented Joseo's group, yes, especially in addition to avenging the defeat of his faction mates in the official war that took place a few days ago. As is known, the group of river bandits who roam the Yangtze River are all affiliated with the River of the Evil group, although in fact they cannot haphazardly make trouble with members of the Orthodox faction, like what they are currently doing. Yes, the name bandits, all means and reasons will be used to be able to realize the personal intentions of their group. As for this time, the justification that had been made by Joseo's juniors when they met this old man before was used by this old man as the reason for the raid he carried out. Your little brother had pulled out his sword when he met me a few days ago. Of course, I can't accept it so as a disciplinary action for the insolent actions that your group did. I will kill you all. The old man said as casually as he could, and then gave command to all his men to finish off the Joseo party in front of there. People in this season are crazy when they are not happy. Only slashing is what they think can solve all disputes, and so a brawl broke out between the two parties on the boat. Mr. Kodit immediately rushed forward to face Kak Gyupang, already clanging the clash of weapons of the two there. No one wanted to give in, Each of them had shown their martial arts skills, but unfortunately the condition of the ship, which continued to shake from earlier, was able to provide an indirect form of support to Pak Kodet. Kak Kupung easily lost his balance due to the rocking ship conditions. His sword dance became broken, and he could not optimally attack Mr. Kodet, who was more accustomed to rocking ship conditions like this. Switching for a moment to the other side, Joseo was already dealing with some bandits who had been drooling all along when they saw Suzuki Shuren's beautiful body. More fortunate Joseo here, the experience of fighting in his previous life, whose memory was still attached to all parts of his body, made Joseo more quickly able to adapt to unstable battlefields, like on this ship. Like a pirate jumping, the boy jumped to and fro, slashing, stabbing, kicking, and slashing all his enemies. Until now it was already red slippery. The deck of the ship he was on was blessed with the blood of the bandits who fell prey to Joseo's sharp sword, and the longer the battle on this ship lasted, the more heated the adrenaline was felt boiling in the bodies of both parties. Joseo and the guards have so far managed to subvert dozens of bandit troops from earlier, who kept coming to attack his group, until when there were no more cockroaches left, Joseo now joined in to help his senior, who had not been able to defeat Mr. Jonet. Simultaneously here, the technical stance they were showing, and Mr. Kodet, who was starting to feel cornered to lose, had to face these two sword knights from Manhwa. Pak Kodet began to unleash his waterbanding ability, which was a bit strange, but because he stomped 1 foot hard against the deck of the ship, suddenly the high waves of river water now crashed into the body of the passenger ship, disrupting his enemy's balance easily and giving Pak Kodet an opening to draw his sharp spear towards the senior king. Up to a few meters away, the sharp tip fell to the senior's skull, but the spear had not yet reached Kak Kupung's body. Joseo had already come first to dispel the hitchhiking motion with a powerful slash from Manhwa's breathing tiller technique called Plum Blossom Decline Slash, and Bumum echoed both of the man's weapons afterwards, and not only once the powerful slash attack was given to the Kodet Sir still in a floating position. In the air he had released dozens of slash techniques earlier, which the old man had now served with helicopter movements from the fast rotation of his sharp spear, which was also accompanied by the formation of a whirlpool eye under the ship they were on, and obviously had gotten a small gap again. Mr. Jodet water was his daily playmate, and the circular motion of this ship he could use to issue the ultimate move from the killer stab technique he had. This raging bluish energy enveloped the old man's steel spear that he slammed after his foot into the deck of the ship, and slid quickly towards Joseo, who had now set up a defensive stance, while releasing violet mist energy to envelop all parts of his sword. Yes, this is one of the applications of using the forbidden technique of divine art violet music, that even with the limited portion we have at the moment, the defensive technique is able to withstand the ultimate attack of the Kodet old man, who is already in the cultivation level of Great Master. Despite vomiting the blood of the little boy, the narrow gap he had made could be used by Kak Kupung to stab the Kodet Sir's shoulder from behind, while he also stabbed his sharp sword, so that the internal injuries received by his enemy would be even worse. But it's not a great master if he wants to give up that easily. With the remaining energy he still has, he turns his sharp spear again. He slammed as hard as he could on the body of the ship he was on until the down blow from the fighter energy that Mr. Kodet was able to split the ship in two, which was greeted by the fury of the river waves afterwards. Until now the ship was torn apart. All the people, with exceptions, fell into the river, scattered everywhere. Their bodies were washed away by the swift flow, and after each of them had emerged to the surface, they were now busy saving each other. While absenting their members, who unfortunately could not be found by this group, the existence of two people. They were Joseo and Ju Sunk, who since that day were declared to have disappeared, swept away by the current of the Dera River, short story spread widely to missing persons information on the two boys, and the search immediately formed all the volunteers obtained along the river for several days. But no matter how hard they try, in the end disappointment is what they get, like swallowed by the earth. The two boys and time flies. Just like that, after 3 weeks since the disappearance of Joseo and Sumki was located in one corner of the city of Gizo, the head merchant was weighing the silver coins in his private room. Since meeting with Joseo the other day, more focused now, the trading strategy he did, the profit he got from the proposed commodities that Joseo suggested to sell, has made this thin, mustachioed old man able to improve his shabby appearance. It's a shame that Mr. Joseo is dead. If not for the direction given, maybe until now, I would still be a lackey for other traders. Ah, sir, if you incarnate later, I promise to give you 5 pieces of silver. 5 seems too much. Yes, 1 piece of silver I will give you. Half, 1, not half, I mean. But you are dead. How can we meet again in the era of your second life later? So I better enjoy myself all these benefits. The old man himself said in his room while deciding to send a prayer to Joseo as payment for the kindness he had given him, and how surprised the stingy old man was when, just like that, a boy had sneaked into his private room. You look pale, Mr. Head. Are you ready to drain the tomb? I meant before, said the boy, just like that, which obviously made the head trader even more panicked, because the figure standing in front of him was now Joseo, who he had sent a spirit prayer before. Yes, still alive. The boy also came with him to this place. There was Sonke, who had looked coldly at the chief merchant. In short, the story was explained again by Joseo, what happened to them. Lost apart from the group in the incident the other day after painstakingly saving himself and also Sonke, suddenly they had arrived in the Hubei area. From there they moved towards Shounen, and in the end decided to return to the Gizo area. Well thought by Joseo here. His separation from the group was an unexpected coincidence that he could use to make it easier to carry out the tomb looting plan, like what he had planned before. It would be troublesome to think if the Manhwa and the Zhuge family knew if they were still alive today. That's why for the past 3 weeks he has always been hiding in the forest to avoid search efforts that have been carried out by several parties. As for eliminating the concerns of his teacher, Joseo has sent a secret letter to the teacher explaining if he is fine and will return to the headquarters if his personal affairs are over. And so, after resting a few days at the headquarters of this golden trading house center, the day came for Joseo to carry out the big plan of looting the tomb. The preparations made by the headmaster were ripe here. As previously ordered by Joseo, 10 talented mercenaries have been recruited with super strict screening methods. They are all clean from criminal records, sir. They are all clean of criminal records, sir, I assure you. Also, if we can trust all of them, our trading house has raised an agreement to those people where if they can be loyal to us in the future, then all the families they have will get financial support from this trading house. So, you don't have to worry about the secrecy of our big plan, emphasized the headmaster to Joseo at that time, who had now given him a map. You remember this route carefully, headmaster, and burn it immediately after you remember it later. I will immediately inform you after the tomb I managed to find and bring out all the valuable treasures in it, said Joseo at that time, and separated the two. Accompanied by Sumki and mercenary troops who have embarked on the big journey of the Joseo, this time for days, they walked through a series of mountains and jungles until finally they arrived at a land filled with rocky hills. And this is where the use of the Joseo brought and approached the Sumki during this time. If the Joseo himself and the Marchadal troops under him could not know the exact location of the tomb's location, it was different with the boy, who was a machine enthusiast, capitalizing on his instincts and broad understanding of hidden machine mechanisms. The Sumki could well know if the strange rock arrangement they encountered at this location was the main entrance to the tomb containing the treasure belonging to the legendary thief. The process is difficult if he wants to explain it to others, but certainly it has been very busy, the two hands of Sunki there flipping and shifting the rock arrangement in front of him until now it has vibrated the rock plains around the area. Automatically two very large piles now appear from the direction of the underground, accompanied by the opening of access to the stairs, down which the group of Joseo immediately entered without another thought. Dark and stuffy situation here. The lighting they have is only sourced from several small torches that they have prepared from the beginning, and after a long time they walk down the stairs. Down it arrives at this, all of them in the first room that shows the symbol belonging to the legendary thief. Starting to be surprised by the people here when they see the mysterious symbol, except for the new Joseo they know now, if the tomb they visited belongs to the Trey spiritual minds, well, starting to play the role of Joseo here, their lives could be at stake. It is true that there is a Sunke who can this every trap mechanism, but he is still a human being. Mistakes he might do later. If any of you want to give up, only now is the time. But if you still want to come and end up dying on the way, I'll make sure I take care of the family you live with, said Joseo at that time. But interestingly here, there is not a single shine that he brings Japer over the statement. We will follow you to the end, Commander. You just give orders, and we will do our best to do it firmly. One of them represents all his friends, and so begins now the journey of this group. Joseo was at the front with Sunki. He entrusted all the selection of the direction of their travel to his adopted brother, because he was the only one who could know well the strange mechanisms scattered in all corners of this tomb building. And true to what should be feared from the beginning, every road they passed was equipped with a trap mechanism that would activate if there was the slightest mistake in using the method of conquering the trap at the base of the road. Here, as time went on, the adults who were there were even more amazed when they saw Sunki's attitude when he analyzed each trap and tamed it repeatedly. They tried to ask how the little boy could easily find out every trap lighter that was very small. But what can they do? The alien language used by Sunki when explaining all the analysis. You try to look in that direction, uncle. We calculate the area of this room. Then we use this formula. We use this vector. We take these points. This is this, and at length, the explanation of the little boy is incomprehensible to others. It's okay, uncle. You don't need to bother. You just know that my brother is very reliable in fields like this, said Joseo at that time, who had become dizzy when listening to his adopted brother's explanation. And with that, we no longer know how much time this group has spent exploring the tomb full of traps, the kinds of traps they find, and the various forms of sharp weapons that appear, because the road they have to pass must be lured active in advance of the weapon trap mechanism. If they want to, they can pass the road safely until finally this group arrives in a large and dark hallway, which on the sides of the road is filled with dozens of wooden dolls forming human postures. The Sunki here began to be busy again, observing the walls and floor of the large hallway in search of the trigger for the secret trap hidden by the tomb maker. Until after a while he stayed there, it was explained by the boy that this kind of trap mechanism had never been seen in the book before. And the only option they had in the Sunki's mind this time was to topple all the wooden dolls in front of there that he was sure would be triggered into motion if anyone passed in front of them. Immediately, without wasting much time, Joseo had pulled out his sharp swords, stimulated forward to all the wooden dolls, and blindly slashed his sword at them. And long story short, after passing through this hallway, the group now arrives at the first treasure storage room that has been left by the legendary witch, large and bright. The room is a pile of silver coins that are very much already forming small hills. In it, as far as their eyes can see, everything in this room is a valuable treasure, and whether this room is the final room containing treasures in this tomb, and what has come out also the journey of Joseo's group facing the spread of the trap mechanism prepared by the legendary witch. Lying back in the room, full of treasures found by Joseo's group. The mercenary members can't wait to take the pile of treasures and choose which objects have the highest selling value. Among the piles of other treasures that seemed to be very unlikely if they wanted to take out all of them, but before the mercenaries' hands touched the pile of treasures that were there, they were shouted at by the Sunki so as not to act rashly in touching the silver coin arrangement. There are still very many mechanisms that cause those embedded in this pile of coins, he said correctly, and we can take the treasure. But you should listen to my directions first about which piles we can take out later. The boy said to them while pointing to several locations where the traps hidden behind the pile of silver coins were. As for trying out the results of his analysis, this time the function has pointed towards a small wooden crate buried among the piles of coins. You can take the box first, brother. I don't think anything will happen if we take it. Without hesitation, immediately obeying the orders of his sister Blegapela now, Joseo's small wooden box earlier, by stepping on a pile of silver coins as carefully as possible so as not to damage the shape of the existing coin arrangement. And after he opened it, apparently there were already 3 bright silver round pills in the box. This jackpot, he thought he didn't know for sure how many servings the pills had, but from the appetizing aroma that the pills released, Joseo could already guess it wasn't canned pills that he got this time, and so after handing over the small box to one of the mercenaries to take with him, Joseo invited the group to continue their journey. There are still other treasure rooms in this tomb. We will go to that location first and start draining this place on our way back, said the boy afterwards, and continued the group's journey. Room after room full of traps they passed through. It was hard to count how many trap mechanisms were successfully conquered by the Sunki on this journey, until after some time that we could not know how long it took, the Joseo group arrived at a room filled with terracotta earth statues. Just a few steps into the room, the stone door hanging above the face of the entrance has now just dropped, and after that the mystical phenomenon, beyond reason, is again encountered by this group of Joseo. Shining bright greenish mystical rays from the eyes and bodies of the statues revealed the ancient spell lines attached to their bodies, and immediately moved like humans the statues. Darting forward towards him, the group of moves, while slashing various sharp weapons tied to the arms. To all of them broke out now a large-scale battle. There everyone except the Sunki had moved to face the attacking statues. Blindly they slashed their respective swords. However, despite being able to dominate the course of the fight quite a bit, the group of moves while slashing various sharp weapons tied to the arms, to all of them broke out now a large-scale battle. There everyone except the Sunki had moved to face the attacking statues. Blindly they slashed their respective swords. But despite being able to dominate the course of the fight, it took this group quite a long time to condition the statues like the immortal monsters, who are the main guardians of this room, can always regenerate them. Reunite the fragmented body structure, thanks to the slash on the enemy, and that way it has been several hours trapped in this room, made by the annoying statues of them, can only rest if the energy invested in the body of the statue land is now drained by itself. As for the small gift that had been obtained from this room, the boy got a bracelet with a greenish boulder tied in the center. I don't know what the use of the bracelet is. That must have been Joseo kept the bracelet in his shirt pocket, and to restore the energy of his entourage from the exhausting battle earlier, it was decided by Joseo if they would rest for a while before continuing the journey. Here began the small talk of the mercenaries, who began to feel close to the leader who had led them this far, and sparked by a general question from the Sunki, began to reveal the main reason for the men to risk themselves in the dangerous mission offered by the chief merchant. Interestingly, these men had not known each other before, but the chief had recruited them with one strong reason in common. The family members of these people are in dire need of money because of the illness they are suffering from. And effective, As well, apparently such methods are pledged by this group of mercenaries here, as long as they can get financial support to treat their family members, let alone just hold the grave. If the chief wants to wage war throughout China, they are also ready for the term. And the saddest of all the stories of these people belongs to this young man. If the lover he loved so much was sold by the girl's own parents to a merchant who owns a brothel, well, the fetish that the merchant had was so strange that the girl's coma was made in the end. I already knew the old man's room at night. I just cut off the little Johnny he had. And I took away my lover, who was still sick, ran away from that place. I'm not sure what to make of this, but I'm sure it's a good idea to take a look at it and see if there's anything you can do to make sure it's a good fit for you and your family. The size of the room was even bigger than the previous treasure room. Not silver coins here, but a pile of bars and gold coins that were even crazier than the pile of silver coins they saw some time ago. Obviously, immediately Sigap again, the Sunki here marks which areas are considered dangerous, while all the mercenaries go to a safe area to look for other treasure formations besides the pile of gold earlier. Joseo's orders for their actions were because he thought there was a fair distribution scheme that the legendary thief treated in each of the treasure rooms he created, and for a great knight like himself, of course, the heirloom was the treasure with the greatest value that he had left in this tome. And rightly guessed Joseo, one of the female mercenaries, now approached him, while carrying a large and long wooden box covered with thick leather on the outside of the box, and after Joseo opened the safety lock, even more pleased, made his facial expression, there were 3 kinds of objects neatly stored in the box. A sword, another small wooden box, and several martial arts books. First, let's open this small box, said Joseo at that time, and how surprised he was when he found that there were already 10 brownish pills stored in the small box. Shounen Booster is the name of the pill that Joseo knows is a kind of legendary pill that can only be produced by the Shaolin Temple, where the method of making it nowadays is rumored to be no longer owned by the Temple of the Bald Monks. 1 grain of this pill can give 20 years' worth of Kai energy to anyone who consumes it, and stealing this pill from the Shaolin Temple is tantamount to declaring war on all the monks there. It's really crazy that this legendary thief was amazed by Yoshio at that time, who couldn't think how strong that figure was in his lifetime. Continue to the second treasure, there are 4 books of martial arts techniques that Joseo found. First, there is the book Swift Word Technique. Second, there is the book Intermediary Attack. Third, there is the book School Walls. And fourth, there is the book Devoinsan, and Moon Art Cherry, increasingly crazy sound that came out of Joseo's mouth when he saw the 4 books earlier. How Not the 4th book Divine Sound and Moon Archery is a book that contains a secret arrow technique owned by an archer knight figure entitled God of the rarest archer's archery manuals like this. And there has been no replacement for the figure of the god of the archer's sword until now, while the stories of his achievements are still being talked about by the Murium community. It is said that 1 shot from the figure's arrow can perforate the rock hill. Not only the power of the arrow shot, the crazier it can be controlled at will the direction of the bow released by the god of the arrow. So it is only natural that the discovery of this book is felt by Joseo to open up a variety of new possibilities for the types of martial arts options he will learn in the future. Sensational is the term for the lucky points he got this time proceeding to the second book entitled Intermediate Attacks. It is still a secret to us, Joseo. What moves are taught in the book, only used by him briefly there. If told to choose between the 4 books he got then without thinking again, he would choose this book. We skip about the other 2 books because Joseo has switched to the 3rd treasure this time, namely a sharp sword, which is one of the Yehan. We don't know here what the meaning of the term Yehan is. Maybe we will find out in the future, because there is no explanation given by Joseo here. And long story short, after completing their business in this room, The group of Joseo moved again for 2 days. They walked through the labyrinth-shaped tomb again. The trap will be after the trap. They face sharp weapons, poisonous gas, and various other forms of traps they encounter again, until finally this group arrives in a room that has a large door in it. Immediately after being examined by Sumki and declared by him safe, the door for them to open the door lever was quickly turned by the Joseo, making the floor of the room vibrate because it was automatically lifted upwards by the door weighing tens of tons. And after they entered the room behind it, there was now in front of them a room containing a large altar and a scattering of weapons that on the top of the stone tombstone at the end of the room had been engraved with the legendary thief's symbol. Yes, there is no doubt that this is the last room owned by this labyrinth tomb, because it has emerged from behind the stone coffin that is there a figure of an old male zombie dressed in simple clothes that has been guessed by the Joseo if he is the main owner of this tomb. Joseo didn't have much pause afterwards, because before he had time to direct the alert command to his group, the old man zombie had moved quickly towards him. Swinging the sharp sword he took in the room towards Joseo, which luckily could be immediately parried by our NC. Broke out now the battle of the shadows of their slash was getting faster as time went on until finally cornered Joseo made hear the old man's sword dance. Was strange the explosion of energy flowing from each slash of the sword was also felt by Joseo not commonly can be delivered by an undead figure like that. Not only swords, all weapons in this room can be used by the zombie. Earlier the backward movement he demonstrated took other weapons and used the weapon as he pleased, as if it had become the most powerful domain of this room. Yes, this is the horror of martial arts techniques owned by the legendary thief. Although the techniques issued were not perfect when he was alive, in fact, it was still quite a hassle for the Joseo to face the rain of attacks thrown by that figure. The more annoyed he is throughout the fight, not only is he good at attack movements and the use of many kinds of weapons, the evasive movements shown by this zombie are also above average. Like the flexible rubber of the zombie's body, he can bend in such a way if he avoids Joseo's attacks while inserting various kick attacks towards the boy's body. It was long enough that the battle of the two lasted not dare the mercenaries help here, because it was emphasized at the beginning if he wanted to duel with the legendary figure. When else would he think, if not now, even though it was safe to exhaust the fight, he lived feeling satisfied? That could be seen on the boy's face. And Joseo, who felt that none of the sword dances he did could dominate this intense battle in the end, decided to take the most extreme way to be able to subvert the zombie figure. He let the zombie get close and landed a hard blow to his body. He lopped the zombie's arm, even though he was vomiting blood out of his mouth, and was released by Joseo, now the violet mist tiller technique that he had never performed in his second lifetime. Night for 2 violet sunset sword art for still first Genesis, said quietly Joseo at that time, and came out again. This is not the energy of excellence. From the sharp tip of his sword dumb hit hard, the energy from close range to the zombie's body, draining all the ki that was lodged in the zombie's body earlier, and backlash also now occurs on the body. Si Joseo immediately vomited blood again. He collapsed his body to the floor, lost no longer strong legs support the weight of his own body, until another satisfied laugh that he could only let out before his dwindling consciousness was satisfied with this Joseo result, because after all he had succeeded in defeating the legendary thief who spread the terror of thieves in all corners of Muram so far, and with that time passed just like that. After 3 days since the final rescue, thanks to the chef checking some Shounen booster by his members during his unconsciousness, can wake up faster the young man than as it should be. All his internal wounds have also healed now. The bonus has increased the portion of ki that is lodged in his small body. Unfortunately, here can be trusted all the mercenary members recruited by the chief merchant, instead of rebelling and running away from Joseo. With the treasures that are there, these people painstakingly take care of and look after their chief. There is also no treasure collection activity that they all do, waiting for the Joseo to wake up, because after all it is not good for them to step over the decision of the Joseo, who they already consider as their own leader. Also explained by one of the mercenaries there, if after Joseo fainted, the large altar in the corner of the room immediately sank, replaced by the appearance of an ivory white tombstone filled with strange writing. "Alright, now let's see what we got in this room," said Joseo to his entourage afterwards, while stepping his feet near the tombstone. "Phantom Martial Art" is the title of the writing engraved on the tombstone. "The sky is the knowledge of the earth, is the power of humans, is the inhabitants, if you can master the earth. And the sky, then it also means you already have 2 eyes, then look for the 3rd eye owned by the inhabitants, then steal all the contents of the world." Written clearly on the tombstone that the Joseo was still thinking about what meaning was stored in it, and as the main gift in this room was obtained by Joseo, a small black wooden chest in which there was a martial arts book entitled Prana Martial Art. A type of martial technique belonging to the ancient Shounen temple has disappeared since hundreds of years of martial arts techniques. The legend circulating in the community states that none of the successors in the Shounen temple have inherited such martial arts techniques. I'm not sure how the technique looks like, but certainly, if this book is used as the main prize by the legendary thief, then there is no doubt about how terrible the destructive power of the technique is. And with that, with the acquisition of the martial arts book earlier, it was declared by Joseo now if the exploration of the tomb in this place he declared the end. "Let's go home," he said to his entourage, which was immediately greeted with shouts of joy from all his entourage, starting this busy Joseo's subordinates, collecting treasures in every room they passed. The distribution of treasures in this place will be taken care of by the mercenary group and the climbing troops owned by the chief merchant. Yes, you could say that the tasks of Joseo and Sumki have been completed here. They only need to wait at the headquarters while these people complete their work, which is not certain how long the distribution process will last. In short, the story is already in the cart of the Joseo Sumki, and the chief merchant this time, from the report given by the chief merchant, around 1 month apparently the time spent by Joseo exploring the tomb. He also explained that he had moved the headquarters of their trading house to another location that was not conducive to the Gizu region, to be used as a storage place for the pile of treasures that they would manage later. Well, good work, sir. Now, I will explain to you about how I will divide the treasure we get in the tomb. You hear this well. All I will give it to you to manage. Consider it a form of investment that I had talked to you about. Turn this money as well as possible and get more profit from it. In return, you have to prioritize the interests of me and my sister in the future, while when sharing the profits you need to calculate carefully later is you 2 parts, Sumki 3 parts, and me 5 parts. What do you think? The Joseo's gone afterwards to the head trader, who had already had difficulty breathing when he heard every word uttered by his new boss. Immediately knelt down to thank him for being given such trust, and with that the time passed, just like that, after the activity of distributing the loot from the tomb had been completed by this group, and Joseo and all his members were now all gathered in the Guyang area. Well, here, in order to bury the suspicions that might be obtained by this trading house, Joseo gave orders to the chief to spread rumors about the discovery of the tomb belonging to the legendary thief they had entered before. There are still many piles of treasures that he deliberately ordered his subordinates to leave traces of their group's arrival at the tomb that have also been removed as well as possible. I don't know what the main purpose of Joseo's actions was, but certainly a few days since he ordered the matter to the head of the news about the discovery of the tomb has now spread widely throughout the plains of China, a temporary peace agreement was taken by several factions of Murim who wanted to enter the tomb. Many of them mobilized to come directly to the location of the tomb, and thus began the massive tomb exploration activities carried out by several factions of Murim earlier. While Joseo and Sunki themselves were still staying at the headquarters of the trading house, the rest of the time was used by him to read some martial arts books he got. And Sunki had not been allowed to go home at this time because of the danger he thought the present time for the little boy. Because if he goes home now, then the head bastards in the Zhuge family will exploit this little boy's ability to loot the legendary thief's tomb. Until after even 1 week they rested in this place, it was decided by Joseo to leave that place. 2 books that did not match the basic breathing techniques he gave to the head man. You ordered 10 mercenaries who came with me to jail, then learn this technique. Do not you make a copy of this book, also emphasize to them, if this technique will be our home investment about the big plan that I have decided in the future later. And with that go here, the 2 boys wandered into the forest. The purpose is yes, besides waiting for the right time to return to their respective residences, while learning martial arts techniques from the books that Joseo had obtained from the previous tomb. A cave located far at the end of the wilderness became the location that Joseo chose this time to be their temporary residence. The 2 boys spent their days here practicing martial arts until, without feeling, 1 month they had spent in such a place. Unfortunately here there is not much progress shown by the Sunki, even though he has eaten Shaolin booster. It's a bit strange that the little boy's body doesn't know where all the ki overflow in the pill went. But what is certain is that Joseo can feel here that there is no talent for him in the art of martial arts. While Joseo himself in the past 1 month has been able to master half of the Plum Blossom sword technique, he still feels it is impossible with his current portion of ki to fully master the forbidden technique owned by the Manhua clan. And so it was decided now by Joseo to replace the basic breathing technique that he had been practicing so far was no longer effective for him. The manhua breathing technique was as a substitute for the technique earlier. What else but the intermediary attack technique whose guidebook he had gotten from the tomb before. Joseo immediately burned the book when he fully understood its contents. In this way it was felt by him that the 2 wings that supported the chairman of Dark Heaven could no longer be owned in this lifetime, especially since the explanation of the Dark Heavens we will continue in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and goodbye.